She conquered two of the most powerful men in the known world. She sat on a throne that commanded the richest kingdom in the Mediterranean. She outlasted generals, war fleets, and political storms that broke harder rulers than her. And then, at 39 years old, Cleopatra VII chose to die on her own terms rather than be paraded through Rome in chains. But here's what nobody told you. The woman they called a seductress was also called a strategist. The woman they called a whore queen was also called a goddess. The woman they said brought Rome to its knees. Rome built the story of her downfall before she'd even fallen. What happened in Cleopatra's bedchamber was never just about desire. It was about survival, territory, succession, and power so raw that it terrified an entire empire into putting her name in its mouth every generation for 2,000 years. The version you've been told is comfortable. Tonight, we go somewhere else. If you're new here, dark history, no filters, no sanitizing. Subscribe now. You're going to want to stay. Secret 1. The year is 48 BCE. Cleopatra is 21 years old and already a fugitive. Her younger brother, Ptolemy the 13 years old, controlled entirely by his advisors, has just had her expelled from Egypt. Not exiled with ceremony. Expelled. Her name removed from monuments, her face threatened with erasure. She fled to Syria with a small army she could barely afford. The throne she'd inherited alongside her brother was now entirely in the hands of men who wanted her dead. Julius Caesar has arrived in Alexandria. He's not there for her. He's there for Egypt's money. Rome is drowning in civil war debt, and Egypt is the wealthiest agricultural economy in the ancient Mediterranean. Caesar wants grain, gold, and tribute. He plants himself in the royal palace at Alexandria and waits. The city is dangerous. Ptolemy's advisors control the ports. Any ship or courier from Cleopatra could be intercepted. She cannot simply walk through the gates. She cannot send a letter that won't be read by her enemies before it reaches Caesar's hands. So she does something that has been romanticized so relentlessly that the real point has almost disappeared. She wraps herself in bedding. Some accounts say a carpet, some say linen, and has herself smuggled past her brother's guards through the city, directly into Caesar's private quarters. That's the version that's been turned into perfume ads and romantic paintings and the opening scene of a dozen films. The bold seductress rolling out of the carpet like a gift. What nobody lingers on is this. The woman in that bundle was not playing a flirtation. She was making a calculation that would determine whether she lived or died in the next 48 hours. Caesar was the only power in that building capable of overriding her brother's army. She had no fleet, no ally inside the palace, and no time. The smuggling wasn't theater. It was the only door she had left. And when she emerged, she did not beg. She presented herself as a queen making a political offer that Caesar would be a fool to refuse. Egypt in exchange for military backing. A throne that could finance his wars in exchange for his soldiers protecting hers. The seduction, if there was one, was in the pitch itself. Ancient sources confirm that Caesar and Cleopatra became lovers. They also confirm she was with child shortly after. But here is the thing Rome never admitted out loud. Caesar didn't move against Ptolemy the Thean purely out of desire. He moved against him because Cleopatra's deal was better. The grain, the treasury, the strategic port access, the legitimate Ptolemaic ruler he could control. All of it was in that room when the carpet unrolled. The intimate secret here is not that she slept with him. The secret is that the man who thought he was choosing her had actually been selected. Caesar was 60 years old. Cleopatra was 21, and she walked out of that room with the most powerful army in the world pointed in her favor. She understood something that Rome refused to write down, that the bedchamber, in a world that gave women almost no other formal power, could be a war room. But Caesar was only the first general who walked into that room thinking he was in control. Secret 2. Let's talk about the marriages Rome found so easy to mock. Cleopatra married her brother Ptolemy V when she assumed the throne at 18. Then, after Caesar had Ptolemy V drowned in the Nile following his military defeat, she married her other, younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. He was 11 years old. She was 22. Two sibling marriages. Ancient historians sneered at this. Modern audiences find it disturbing. Neither reaction understands what was actually happening. In Ptolemaic law, a queen could not rule alone. The title required a male co-regent. A foreign husband would bring foreign claims. A powerful nobleman would build a rival dynasty. A Roman general would turn Egypt into a client state overnight. A child brother, no army, no network, no interest in governing, was not a husband. He was a legal signature, a name required by succession law that allowed the actual ruler to actually rule. Cleopatra didn't marry her brothers out of desire. She married them because the alternative was not ruling at all. And Rome knew this. Rome's historians knew this. They wrote about it as proof of Eastern decadence anyway, because the alternative was acknowledging that a woman had found the one loophole in Ptolemaic law that handed her absolute power, and she had used it twice without blinking. The real secret of those marriages is not the marriages themselves. It's how effectively they've been weaponized for 2,000 years to make her seem monstrous rather than brilliant. Ptolemy XIV, her second brother-husband, died in 44 BCE. Some ancient writers said poison, others said illness. Cleopatra, who had just given birth to Caesar's son and was navigating the immediate chaos after Caesar's assassination, was conveniently blamed by sources closest to Rome. Whether or not she ordered it, the result was surgical. The child placeholder was replaced by her infant son, Caesarion, Caesar's biological heir, a co-regent she controlled entirely, a name no Roman senator could dismiss and no rival could credibly claim. She had removed the only person legally positioned to challenge her from inside the palace, one room at a time. But the real threat to her throne was never going to come from inside that palace. It was being assembled, slowly and methodically, 3,000 miles away in Rome, and the man building it had already decided that the only way to destroy Cleopatra was to make sure the world forgot she was ever a queen at all. Secret 3. Sometime in the ancient tradition, the exact origin is disputed, Cleopatra acquired a Greek nickname, Mariocane. The word in its crudest translation is an explicit sexual insult describing promiscuity on a grotesque scale. Ancient sources attached legends to it so outrageous they were almost certainly invented. 10,000 men, 100 men in a single night. The kind of numbers that exist not in reality, but in the arsenal of someone who wants to make sure a name can never be spoken without a smirk attached to it. Here is what we know for certain. Cleopatra had 2 documented long-term lovers in her adult life. Julius Caesar, with whom she spent several years and had a son. Mark Antony, with whom she spent over a decade, had 3 children, built a political empire, and died. That is the complete historical record of her intimate partnerships. 2 men, over the course of roughly 20 years of active rule. Now here is what we know about the men who needed that name to exist. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, the Roman world fractures into civil war. The Second Triumvirate, Caesar's heir Octavian, his general Mark Antony, and their ally Lepidus, divides Rome like a carcass. Antony takes the east. He meets Cleopatra at Tarsus in 41 BCE, and what begins as a political negotiation between two powers who need each other becomes the most consequential alliance in the final century of the Roman Republic. Over the next decade, Antony and Cleopatra formalize their partnership. He grants her and her children control of vast eastern territories. She funds his military campaigns. They hold a ceremony in Alexandria, the donations of Alexandria, in which their children are named rulers of kingdoms stretching from Armenia to Cyprus to Cyrene. In Rome, Octavian is watching. Antony is popular. He is a celebrated general. He has a legitimate claim to co-rule Rome. He is also formally married to Octavian's sister, Octavia, a marriage Octavian arranged specifically to bind Antony to him. The fact that Antony has abandoned Octavia in favor of Cleopatra, that he has given Roman-controlled territories to an Egyptian queen's children, that he may intend to make Alexandria the center of a new Eastern Empire, all of this is a direct threat to Octavian's consolidation of power. So Octavian does what every political operator does when he cannot defeat a rival on the merits. He defines the rival's weakness. He takes Antony's will, which he claims to have stolen from the temple of the Vestal Virgins where it was stored, though historians have questioned how legitimate this document was, and he reads it to the Roman Senate. The will allegedly states that Antony wishes to be buried in Egypt beside Cleopatra. Rome erupts. The Senate declares war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra. The propaganda is precise and deliberate. Antony is not a traitor, he is a victim. He is a great Roman man who has been bewitched by an Eastern sorceress. He cannot be held responsible. She is the enemy. She is the foreign whore queen who has stolen a Roman hero's mind. Ancient writers begin producing, under Octavian's patronage, the most sustained character assassination campaign in classical history. Cassius Dio calls her insatiably greedy for sex. Sextus Propertius describes her as a woman exhausted by her own servant's use of her. The nickname Mary O'Kane attaches to her name like a brand. The political goal is transparent. If you can define Cleopatra as a sexual animal rather than a political actor, you can dismiss every decision she made, every treaty, every strategic alliance, every dynastic calculation, as the manipulation of lust rather than the exercise of power. Because if she was actually a brilliant diplomat who had held Egypt independent from Rome for 20 years through a combination of strategic alliances, military coordination, economic leverage, and institutional intelligence, then she was dangerous. And dangerous enemies deserve respect. Whores just deserve to lose. The name Mary O'Kane was a weapon. And Octavian, who would eventually become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, the man who rewrote the foundation myth of an entire civilization. He was the one who forged it. And the worst part? It worked. For 2,000 years, it worked. Which makes what happened inside the Society of Inimitable Livers even harder to explain, because that was the room where Cleopatra stopped playing defense entirely. Secret 4. Picture the room. Not a palace banquet hall with clean torchlight and orderly rows of couches. Something looser than that, something more dangerous. The outskirts of Alexandria, 41 BCE. The oil lamps burning low, the wine already old. Somewhere in that hall, a Roman general who commands the largest army east of Rome. an Egyptian queen who commands the only treasury capable of financing his wars. And surrounding them, eating from the same tables, sharing the same cups, military commanders, regional kings, court allies, philosophers, poets, people who controlled ports and grain routes and loyalties that could pivot a war. This is the Amimetobioi, the Society of Inimitable Livers. The name is a joke with teeth, to live in a way that cannot be imitated. Not Roman restraint, not public virtue, something that left marks. Ancient writers couldn't stop describing it. Nude performances, banquets that stretched past dawn, drinking competitions, theatrical provocations that would have gotten a Roman senator exiled for attending. From Rome's vantage point, the whole thing was a moral catastrophe. Antony, once a great general, sprawled drunk in an Egyptian palace while a foreign queen fed him grapes and ruined him. Exactly the kind of story Octavian needed. But look at who was actually in that room. The guests at the society were not random pleasure seekers. They were the people whose loyalty Cleopatra and Antony needed to lock down before the next war. You cannot bind a military commander to your cause with a contract. Contracts get torn up the moment the other side offers more money. But a night where that commander drank until he confessed something, where he danced, where he was seen being human, in a room full of people who were also being human. That creates a different kind of bond. The shared transgression was the point. The excess was the architecture. Cleopatra herself had spent years presenting a different face entirely. The goddess Isis made flesh, the divine queen, the untouchable sacred ruler whose image was carved into temple walls. That persona held political power. It also held distance. Here, she was setting it down, letting the room see something closer to the person underneath. And in doing so, making every person in that room feel chosen, trusted, inside. That is how you build a court that holds. Rome called it depravity. What Rome couldn't say out loud was that it was working, that Antony's Eastern network was tight, that Cleopatra's alliances were holding, that the people in those rooms were still loyal years after they should have defected. The secret inside the Society of Inimitable Livers is not what happened on those floors. It's that Cleopatra understood something about power that Rome had codified into law and architecture and military rank. And she had built the same thing out of a banquet. Which is exactly why, when Octavian finally moved to destroy her, the first thing he did was make sure those rooms could never be described as anything except decadence. Because if you understood what they actually were, you'd understand how close she came to winning. Secret 5. 31 BCE. The Battle of Actium. The naval engagement that will decide the fate of the known world. Cleopatra personally commands her warships. She is not watching from shore. She is there. Ancient sources record this with a contempt that is itself a kind of testimony, because nothing required her presence on that fleet. She could have remained in Alexandria. She chose not to. The battle turns against them. Octavian's naval commander Agrippa has anticipated every formation. Antony's fleet is outmaneuvered in a harbor it cannot escape. Cleopatra breaks through the Roman line with 60 ships. Some historians have interpreted this as flight, others as a strategic extraction of her treasury vessels and a calculated retreat to preserve what could still be preserved. The debate has never been resolved to everyone's satisfaction. What is not debated, they lost. And when they lost everything. Antony and Cleopatra retreat to Egypt. The following year, 30 BCE, Octavian's armies advance on Alexandria. There is no allied fleet left. There is no second front. Antony's forces dissolve. Antony dies. He falls on his sword after receiving what may have been a false report of Cleopatra's death, though some sources dispute the sequence of events. The details of his end are messy in the sources, and they likely should be. Cleopatra is still alive. She has retreated into a mausoleum she had prepared, with her most loyal attendants and what remains of the royal treasury. Octavian needs her alive. He needs her for his triumph in Rome, the ceremonial parade in which a victorious general displays captured enemies to the Roman crowd. A Ptolemaic queen, the last pharaoh of Egypt, in chains through the streets of Rome. The symbolism would be enormous. Negotiations begin. Octavian assures her through messengers that she will be treated well. She is not mistreated in captivity. He perhaps believes she will comply or that the assurances are enough. She was 39 years old. She had been a political actor since she was 18. She understood with complete clarity what awaited her in Rome. Not death, that would have been too clean. What awaited her was display. The goddess Isis, the queen of Egypt, the woman who had held off Roman annexation for 2 decades, walked through the streets like evidence, used by Octavian's triumph the same way her body and her name and her reputation had been used by his propaganda, as an instrument, as a prop. She had spent 20 years refusing to be an instrument. On the day the decision had to be made, Cleopatra chose death. The method is uncertain. The famous asp, an Egyptian cobra, sacred animal of the goddess Isis, appears in ancient sources, but cannot be confirmed. Modern historians have suggested various alternatives, including a fast-acting poison she had prepared herself, which is consistent with what we know of Ptolemaic court medicine and her documented interest in pharmacology. Ancient sources record that she studied the properties of poisons with the same methodical attention she brought to everything else. She may have chosen the asp precisely for its symbolism. The cobra was the uraeus, the royal serpent worn by pharaohs on their crowns as a sign of divine authority. To die by the cobra was, in that symbolic register, not defeat. It was a final statement of sovereignty. I am still pharaoh, even now, even here. You do not get to define how this ends. Whatever the method, she died before Octavian could lead her through the streets of Rome. He had to settle for an effigy of her in his triumph, a statue, a representation, because the actual woman had made the only decision left to her that he could not override. Octavian, Augustus, as history would remember him, had won the war, the kingdom, and the future. He got Egypt's treasury. He got the grain supply. He got the empire. He did not get her. And the final secret, the one that sits underneath all 5 of them, is coming. The cost. After Cleopatra's death, Octavian had Caesarion, her son by Julius Caesar, 17 years old, executed. The last biological link to the original Caesar line, eliminated before it could become a rallying point for anyone who might challenge the new emperor. Her children by Antony, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were taken to Rome. The twins and the younger boy were paraded in their mother's place during Octavian's triumph. They were then raised in the household of Octavia, the Roman woman their father had abandoned in favor of their mother. History does not record what that house felt like. Cleopatra Selene eventually married the king of Mauritania and produced a dynasty. She named one of her sons Ptolemy. Some fragment of the bloodline survived. The rest was absorbed into the Roman machine and made to disappear. Egypt became a Roman province, the richest economy in the Mediterranean, directly administered by Octavian's hand-picked governor. Not a senator, not an appointee of the Roman system, but a personal imperial agent answerable only to the emperor. Because Octavian understood what Cleopatra had understood, whoever holds Egypt holds the food supply of Rome, and whoever holds the food supply holds the city. She had known the stakes from the beginning. She had played the game with every resource available to her: intelligence, presence, myth, alliance, persuasion, performance, and, when necessary, the intimacy of a room where two people negotiated the fate of empires. And Rome, which could not defeat her honestly, rewrote her as a whore, a witch, a monster, and a warning. The warning was real, just not the one they intended. The warning was this: a woman who understood power as well as the men who held it was more dangerous to the system than any army. And so the system did what systems always do when they cannot contain a threat. They changed the story. They're still telling that story. And you still clicked on a title that used the word Bedchamber, which means the story still works. That's the most disturbing secret of all. The history that this channel explores doesn't stop at the names everyone knows. It goes into the rooms nobody opens. Subscribe if you want to keep going.